Downtown on State Street. It's one right here on the ground. It's a female. And then over here by the Chicago Theater, they have a male shot over here. It's a teenager.
Okay, so we done all seen the lady going viral, being attacked by those thugs with her children. The media be painting y'all like y'all name is Chirac. And I ain't seen no video where the kids getting stumped out. I ain't seen no videos of nobody hair getting pulled out, nobody phone getting taken. All I keep seeing is people saying they kids.
And you're not gonna hear about it. Want to know why? Because that's not the narrative the media wants to push. A lot of people have never even visited Chicago, but they love talking about Chicago crime. And it's funny how nobody talks about the millions of us who lived in Chicago our entire lives and never fell victim to any of the crimes and violence being reported. Welcome back to Voice and Value. And if you're new here, go ahead and get comfy. But first, I'm going to need y'all to hit that like button before you settle in, because today we're going to talk about how Chicago gets a really bad reputation, but the headlines don't tell the whole story of this great city. I remember being in downtown Chicago one morning, walking to work with my Starbucks in hand. The sun was hitting the lake just right. People were rushing to catch trains and taxis were honking, just your typical Chicago energy. And as I'm walking, a woman stops me and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, but you look like you know where you're going. Is it safe to walk around here?" She was your typical tourist with a backpack and professional camera hanging from her neck. I just smiled at her and said, "Ma'am, I've been walking these streets my entire life. You're in the heart of the Loop, and it doesn't get any safer than this." That moment reminded me that people who don't live here have such a distorted image of what Chicago really is. They think the entire city is a war zone, like we're all dodging bullets just to go get groceries. Meanwhile, the rest of us are waking up, going to work, taking our kids to school, living our lives and minding our own business. But today I want to talk about that. I want to talk about why being in Chicago is nothing to be ashamed of and why the narrative around Chicago is so incomplete. So for anyone watching who's from Chicago or any city with a bad reputation for that matter, it's time to take your power back, because the truth is simple. Your environment may shape your background, but the circles that you move in and the company that you keep, that's going to determine your experience. In Chicago, well, Chicago raised me right. My experience has been one of rich culture, great alliances, and decades of a crime-free lifestyle. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. My beginnings were humble. I grew up in a part of the city that's now called Bronzeville. Growing up, I was a sheltered kid. Back then, it was just home to me. I wasn't thinking about crime statistic or news headlines. I was thinking about walking down the block to the neighborhood store, catching a CTA bus to school, and enjoying Harold's Chicken on a Friday night. Chicago shaped some of my biggest life moments. It's where I went to school. It's where I shopped. It's where I partied. I met my husband in Chicago. I worked in downtown Chicago for decades, and I raised my daughter in the city of Chicago, and she thrived in Chicago's private schools. But guess what? In all that time, I was never a victim of crime that we hear about happening in Chicago on a regular and recurrent basis. Never been accosted, never been beaten, or had any type of weapon used on me. Not on the south side, not downtown, not in traffic, not at work, and not walking the streets during the busiest hours of the day. I lived, worked, and moved through the city, and my experiences were shaped by my lifestyle, not the stereotypes. Oh, but wait, I'm lying. There was this one incident back in the 90s when I purchased a brand new TV from a guy at a price so low it was a steal. Well, I found out he actually did steal it and sold it to me for dirt cheap. And only a few days later, my South Shore apartment got broken into, and guess what they took? Yep, they stole my stolen TV. Ain't that a kick in the head? Well, I know now that it was my karma, and most likely connected to the same person who delivered that 27-inch big back to my apartment. But it was also a lesson to be mindful of the company that you keep. That guy was a friend of a friend who conveniently worked at an electronics store. Well, let's just say I learned my lesson. And my mom always said to me, when you do wrong, wrong will follow you. But that incident helps me drive home my point today about the company that you keep and how it shapes your experiences. Now, I'm only focusing on Chicago today because that's my personal experience. When it came time for my son to start school, we moved to the burbs, less than an hour away from the city limits, not because Chicago wasn't safe, but because I wanted a different school district for him. That's it. That's all. No dramatic exit story, no crime running us out of the city, just a decision that me and my husband made based on opportunity and preference. In fact, my husband and I continue to commute to and from Chicago for work. We still have family that live in Chicago. We have close friends that live in Chicago. But if I'm going to keep it a buck, we knew that our son could have had a very different experience in Chicago growing up as a young black male. We were living in the wild hundreds when we decided to move out of the city. If you know, you know. Still, we weren't the victim of any crimes. To this very day, Chicago has remained a part of my heart and identity. It's the foundation of who I am. So when people online try to paint Chicago as some kind of lawless wasteland, I always ask, what part of the city were you in? And what kind of people did you hang with? Because those two things matter more than people want to admit. Being cool and hanging with crowds, that was never my thing. Neither are my kids interested in that kind of stuff. We're a bunch of nerds who love books, computers, and people. Of course, I heard and read about the crime in the city, but we weren't around the people who were causing it. There's so much rich culture in the city of Chicago. There's no excuse of hanging out in the streets because there's nothing to do. Life is what you make it. Ever heard that saying before? Before I ever traveled outside of the city, I enjoyed Chicago museums, beaches, stage plays, festivals, bike trails, restaurants, you name it. Some of the recent events coming out of Chicago have been heartbreaking. I can't deny that.
In first grade. Moments later, she was shot 3 times. One of those bullets hit her in the face.
The unaliving of Ramika Meeks
Blackman,
Blackman, a tragedy that shook a lot of us.
Why is the woman who pulled the trigger still free?
School kids fighting an adult. Never heard of that before. A senseless shooting in downtown Chicago, the very heart of the city.
We got a female shot right here, y'all. 2 teenagers shot.
These things are
Downtown
real,
Main
y'all.
Street.
And they're very painful. They're not to be
One right here
excused
on
or
the grounds is a
minimized, and I'm
female.
not here
And then
to
over
try
here
to
by
act like
Chicago
they're
Theater,
isolated
They
incidents.
have a male shot over here.
But they are also not the norm for every household in Chicago. When you take a look at the parents and friend circles a lot of these perpetrators run in, you find that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in a lot of these cases. They're not strangers to the CPD, and neither are their close family members and posse. The problem is that social media takes the worst moments, puts them on blast, and make it look like the entire city is living like that, and that simply is not true. Millions of people live in Chicago. Millions go to work, millions go to school, go to church, enjoy the lakefront, shop downtown, walk their dogs, go out to eat, and come home safely every single day. I'm one of them, and I had no problem living on the right side of the law. It's not a hard thing to do. But peace is not viral. Normal life is not shareable content. But bad behavior is, and crime most certainly is. And because of that, Chicago gets reduced to a reel of negativity. For many people, Chicago is synonymous to crime, and they dare not even visit there. You know, One thing that tends to get left out of the narrative is the fact that crime in Chicago has actually been going down in recent years. And that's according to official police data. That's the truth. And I want to make sure we're honest about it, because part of reclaiming our story means looking at the real numbers, not just the sensational headlines going viral in the news media and on social media. Here's what the Chicago Police Department is reporting. In their 2024 In Review report, they noticed reductions in homicides, shootings, and shooting victims, marking some of the lowest levels since 2019. To be specific, homicides are down. Shooting incidents have dropped and fewer people are being shot overall. In early 2024, police data showed homicides were down more than 20% compared to the same time in the prior year. And shootings had dropped too. That's not a small shift, y'all. That's real progress. Even beyond what CPD reports, there's outside analysis backing this up. NORC at the University of Chicago released data showing significant declines in multiple crime categories in 2024. Homicide, motor vehicle theft, and burglary all dropped sharply. Now, this doesn't mean that crime is gone. I'm not trying to say that, or that every neighborhood feels safer in the same way. And it certainly doesn't erase the pain and fear that so many people feel when violence hits so close to home. But it does challenge the oversimplified narrative that crime is out of control everywhere in Chicago all the time. These statistics are also behind the outrage that we saw from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson when the president wanted to send the National Guard to Chicago to deal with the crime. Because the overall crime rates have been on a steady decline in Chicago, the president's actions felt more like an attack on the city. There was no cry for help, and certainly not from the Illinois government officials. Here's why this matters in our conversation. Well, first of all, for balance. We talk about being proud of Chicago. We're not ignoring the work to be done. We're acknowledging the progress that is happening and continues to happen throughout the years. And also for credibility. By bringing in real data, we're not just defending the city emotionally. We're making an evidence-based case. And finally, for hope and agency. If crime can go down, it shows that the city is not doomed to perpetual decline. It means community, policing, and systemic change can and has been making a difference. So yes, Chicago has its challenges, but the story isn't constant violence. The story includes real measurable improvement too, and that's something to hold on to when people try to reduce the city to nothing but fear. Now let's talk about something that people seem to be oblivious to. In any major city, Chicago, New York, LA, Houston, the circles you move in shape your reality. Two people can live in the same city and experience two totally different worlds. Why is that, you ask? Because they run with different crowds. If you're around people who are constantly into drama, trouble, and risky behavior, guess what? You're going to find yourself around drama, trouble, and risky behavior. Now, on the flip side, if you're around people who work hard, go to school, stay focused, mind the business, and take care of their family, your life reflects that too. People act like location is destiny. No, it's not. Character is destiny. Community is destiny. And choices are destiny. And I say all this as someone who grew up, who lived and raised children in Chicago. My own experience was full of opportunity, peace, education, work, culture, and community, because those were the circles that I traveled in. Still today, my circle is comprised of close family members, people I went to school with, people I worked with, and members of associations and nonprofits that I join and support to this very day. Hell, I'm no perfect Patty, and neither are my friends, but our lifestyles practically mirror each other. Never lost friends or family members to crime or prison. Never been to jail or prison. We're not special or some kind of aliens. We're simply law-abiding citizens who enjoy life and good, wholesome fun, just like millions of other Chicagoans. Let's also remember something. Chicago comes in every type. Just like any other city, you have your entrepreneurs, teachers, professionals, creatives, activists, elders, mentors, parents, pastors, coaches, and everyday folks who want the same thing anyone wants: peace, success, and a good life. But when you let the media define Chicago, you forget about the millions of people who've never been in trouble a day in their life. The ones who never made the news. I'm talking about the families who've lived in the same home for generations. The people who built businesses from scratch. The students who graduate every year and go on to achieve greatness. What I'm trying to say here is that Chicago is bigger than its worst headlines. And it's way bigger than the handful of people causing chaos. Chicago is history. Chicago is culture. Chicago is Sunday dinners and block club parties. Chicago is the Bud Billiken Parade. Chicago is Millennium Park and the Art Institute. Chicago is that unbeatable skyline. Chicago is summers at the lakefront and winters that make you question your entire life. Chicago is grit. Chicago is excellent. Chicago is home. And let me say this. You could be from Chicago and live a beautiful, peaceful, and purpose-filled life. Your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. Your character does. Your company does. And most importantly, your choices do. If you're from Chicago or any city with a reputation, don't let anyone shame you. Your story is your story. And a lot of people have lived full, safe, successful lives in Chicago without ever touching the chaos the media tries to glorify. Yeah, your environment may teach you lessons, but your relationships shape your reality. So the next time someone tries to stereotype your city, you tell them this. I don't live the Chicago experience that the media talks about. I live the Chicago experience I built for myself. Because at the end of the day, it's not where you're from. It's how you move about the city.
Get in, y'all. We're spending the weekend in Chicago. I flew out of sunny South Florida and went straight to the Windy City. The Uber prices were looking a mess, so we took the Blue Line train into the city for only $5. It was super easy and convenient to use, but imagine my face when the escalator actually wasn't working, so we had to go up all types of stairs with our luggage. We checked right into our hotel at Arlo, Chicago, and y'all, this hotel gets a 5 stars from me. It's in a great location, and the hotel staff was so welcoming. We got ready and hit the road running because, baby, we had things to do. First stop, Wendella Architecture Boat Tour. We did the 45-minute tour, and oh my gosh, this was the best way to start our trip in Chicago. We learned so much about the city's history, the buildings, and baby, that skyline. Yeah, Chicago, y'all won. And after that, we really just walked around and took in the beautiful views of the city. Then it was time for the next spot. Dinner at Virtue. This elevated soul food spot is a must visit. The braised short rib was cooked to perfection. That mac and cheese was so creamy, and the cornbread, too good. I'd come back just for this restaurant. Our waiter surprised me with this cute happy birthday candle, and there was no better way to end this night. Chicago, I love you already.